questions, it's entirely up to you. Thank you and welcome this morning.
Can you hear me? Or?
Yes, thank you. If you
Oh,
leave that,
excellent.
that's it.
Good morning, everybody. I like to be called Ros anyway, so it's nice to see many familiar faces. Now, I've come along because I think Airbnb is really good for Rotorua. My company's involved in tourism, so I love tourists. I have a little house down at Waka in Froud Street, and I've decided it was a good opportunity just to let it out for a few days over Christmas for Airbnb. And we've been surprised what a job that is, actually. You have to have a very high standard. You have to do your cleaning really well. You get bad feedback if they can see a spider outside your house. And so I would not think that a small house that's let out occasionally is going to be anything like a large business, certainly not for me. And I think it's only good for Rotorua because it increases the number of visitor nights that people will spend, because we have usually a minimum stay, which a lot of people do with Airbnb because of the amount of housework involved, and we have to have it empty for a while to get ready for the next lot. So that, in terms of income, means that we don't have anything like a business operating there. In fact, many years ago when I started Roscraft, I did have a business that worked in my house, and I never got it. I was sent it off the rate, so I never had to pay anything extra for it. So I would like to encourage initiative with Rotorua people to use their homes to increase our visitor numbers. And I also think that it's very seasonal. Like at the moment it's cold and people aren't booking, and so it's not going to be, for me, a full-time thing. It does help, however, to pay the rates, which is very nice. The occupancy rates and the income are not that high, and we've had very good feedback. We also find that it's a great way to advertise Rotorua attractions on a personal basis. My daughter meets a lot of the people and she's just great with them. She's unable to work at the moment because she has poor health, and just being able to be involved as being a meter and a greeter means that people go and visit a lot of attractions that they may not have otherwise gone to. In our case, they go often to Rotorua Village, they go to Te Puia, they go to Rainbow Springs. They visit a lot of attractions that we recommend to them, and we get very good feedback on how good it has been to have someone personal recommend the places in Rotorua. And our own location near the Waka Forest makes it a very attractive place. So I would like to say that the occupancy rates and the income and the seasonal part-time nature of Airbnb are something for you perhaps to consider. There's also quite a degree of uncertainty with Airbnb. It's not like running a motel and you get a whole lot of bookings and you're going to have 20 or 30 people coming. You might think you've got no one, and then a day or so before someone will ring, and then you've got to make sure the place is all good. So I do not consider Airbnb on the size we're doing it to be anything like a business operation. So I'd like to make that point quite clear. Along with the flow-on benefits for tourism and tourists, also I think eventually Airbnb will create a few more jobs because people will be getting sick of doing their own cleaning and might even think of employing someone who wouldn't have otherwise had a job. And I also think it's relevant to the housing crisis in Rotorua because it will enable people to keep their own homes and not have houses being flogged off just to make money, but people will be able to stay in their own home. Lady along the road for us just lets out one room, and that makes a big difference for her and means she can stay in her house. So I'd like you to consider that as well. Most of our guests have been tourists from overseas, but we have had whānau returning to New Zealand and have come over. One family came and someone passed away in the family and they stayed for another week. So we think that the type of environment we provide was much more conducive to a family being able to come and meet, and we had lots of people coming to join in, and it was just using it as a home, which would not have happened in a motel. We answer many inquiries from guests about activities, and as I've mentioned before, have directed people to a lot of attractions. And I understand also that during crank works and busy events, there's actually quite a shortage of accommodation. So by providing accommodation in Rotorua, we're keeping people here rather than sending them to outlying districts such as Matamata, Hobbiton, wherever you go, and they don't have to travel as far to come to local events. And at the times that we've been busy, I've noticed most of the motels have a no vacancy sign. So I don't really think we're competing. It's a totally different type of occupation. In our case, it's a lot smaller. So I think that's about all I've got to say, but I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ros. Yes, I'm sure there'll be some questions. Your Worship?
Thank you, Ros, for taking the time to come, because this is an issue that's sort of getting more and more interesting. You're probably the perfect Airbnb in terms of one house, one owner, local person caring for visitors with hospitality. Is there a need, in your view, to look at any regulation at all? Because there's another argument saying, get in and regulate.
Yeah, I can hear that, and I mean, I can also appreciate if I had a motel, I might think others had an unfair advantage. But I think it's got to be considered with the size of the occupation and of the building. I have friends in Queenstown who it's a really, they earn 60,000 or something a year from Airbnb. Well, I think that's a totally different thing. So maybe it's a ceiling of a certain turnover or something, but I think you'll find if people just won't do it if it comes to too higher restriction on it, people just probably say, well, why should I bother? Or they won't let on they're doing it. Yeah, I don't really know what the cut-off figure would be. I don't know. I mean, for us, we haven't been doing it for very long, so certainly during some of the busy months, I mean, 100 nights would be like a third of a year, wouldn't it? That's possibly about right, yeah. I don't really know. I haven't sat down and worked it out as well as you have.
Councillor Stewart.
There is an opposing view, Rosalind, a very strong.
Yeah.
We've had submissions regarding that.
That's why I'm here.
How do your neighbours feel about you operating a business?
Well, they don't feel it's a business.
Hang on, I haven't finished my question.
Yeah.
How do your neighbours feel about you operating a business in a residential setting?
Well, I don't think they do feel we're running a business. In my case, I'm staying in my house quite a bit, so they don't see it as a business, and they've been more than happy about it. In fact, when I'm not staying there, they will say, oh, we had some nice people popped in. So I have not had any feedback that's been negative or any feeling that we're operating a business.
Does Inland Revenue treat your operation
Yes, everything
as
is
a
still
business?
taxable. Obviously, we declare our income. There's no question of not having tax. It's a different proposition to having an increased rating figure. It probably wouldn't be worth it, to be honest with you.
Councillor Gould.
Madam Chair. Thank you, Ros, for your report this morning. I'm quoting from your written report on number 2. Provide funding support for consultation process for the sewerage scheme for your particular area. What do you want to...
Sorry,
Is this something not being done correctly, or do you want it taking a little bit longer, or do you want more...
Are you on the right submission, Councillor Gould?
Yeah, I'm on page 148, number 2.
No, I don't
no.
think I've got anything about that.
No, that's the
Sorry.
wrong. Sorry, you've missed a page. Thank you. Councillor Tapsell.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your presentation. Today it's nice to hear from someone who's operating it themselves. I am aware that we do have a lack of accommodation here in the Rotorua. Have you, with your guests or know of any other people that operate these Airbnbs, have they said or communicated with you that they are staying there because they can't find any accommodation with the local hoteliers?
It hasn't come up, to be honest with you. They've just made a booking or asked if we're available.
Councillor Hunt.
Thank you. Thanks, Ros, for coming in. The other issue has been number of rooms. Now, for you, you've said one or two, and most people you know.
Yeah.
The issue that has arisen that's caused the most problem has been those homes that have maybe 4 or 5 rooms and have occupancy from up to 20 to 30 people.
Oh, no.
You've agreed or recognised the 100 days we have put in. Do you think there ought to be something that addresses number of occupants or number of rooms?
Well, in our case, I don't think we've ever had more than 5, if that helps you, and it is a whole house, so we do let out the whole house. I'm with my daughter and move out and then move back in. So we usually have 5 and quite often 2, so it's not big numbers. So I can't really comment. I think 20 would be pretty alarming, actually.
Thank you, and I'll put the
That
final...
would have an impact on a neighbourhood, having 20 people coming, yes.
Ros, I'll put the final question. Obviously, the travelling public have choices these days, and yours is one of them. Do you get any feedback from your guests as to why they have chosen Airbnb?
I think they like having a house. The feedback we've had is awesome, that it's, that we've had very good feedback. Ours is an old house, it's an old ex-Maori Affairs house, and they love that it's a character home. And we've had people from England and just comment, and we're not flash, we're just tidy and clean, but they love it because it's a homely place. And the feedback we have is it's so much nicer than staying in a hotel or somewhere. Best place we've stayed in New Zealand, we got on one of our feedback.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you for coming along
That's
this
all right.
morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Our next submitter is Rotorua Taupo Federated Farmers, and Alan's here, I believe. Is that correct? Is Alan here? Alan Wills? I think so. Was he here? Oh. All right, so thank you. I thought he was. He might have just stepped out. No, I'm just asking. Rotorua Federated Farmers, that's the one I've got on my list next. So not here at the stage, thank you. Then the Hospitality New Zealand, Bay of Plenty branch, Alan Searseer. Good morning, Alan. Welcome.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much. My name's Alan Searseer. I'm Regional Manager for Hospitality New Zealand. My role is to help business owners with their business in the hospitality sector, and I'm here today to talk to the issue of short-term accommodation. You've no doubt all read my submission that I made, and I've supplied a handout of what I want to go over today, which is basically just to summarise some of the key points that have been raised. The Council issued a consultation document raising various issues which the public and ratepayers may care to consider, and amongst those was a discussion on short-term rental accommodation. The document raised legitimate concerns about the equity and fairness of traditional commercial businesses paying a rate differential of 1.72 times that charge to residential. However, other small businesses operating under Airbnb, Book a Batch, and others are not being treated as businesses at all, unless they voluntarily elect to do so. Our concern is that the Council has an admirable policy allowing up to 100 days use of a holiday home. No compliance checks, to my knowledge, are done to ensure that the property owners are fully declaring the business status of their property. While we appreciate that the difficulty of ensuring total compliance, it's not impossible. This morning, today, I was able to determine the following with a brief 10-minute surf of the Book a Batch website. On the front page of that website, and I went to the front page, I selected 6 properties, and each of them, they were booked out for the following nights over June, July and August, which is low season for Rotorua. So you can see there the 6 properties that I found on the front page. We're selling, on average, almost 25 nights over that 3-month period for an income of approaching $8,000 on average. And you'll see that one property there is charging $450 per night, but they sold the most nights at 41 nights over that 3-month period. So these are not small hobby houses. In our submission, we included an analysis of the rooms that were available on Airbnb, Book a Batch and holiday houses. And that indicates that as many as 550 residences have been sold for that weekend alone. Now, that's a busy time, I appreciate that. It could also be higher because it's unknown exactly how many properties are listed in Airbnb. Contrary to popular view, the business of short-term rental accommodation is not a hobby. It is done for commercial gain, and our brief research suggests that the average property can achieve sales of at least $30,000 per annum based on the low season bookings indicated above. So we urge Rotorua Lakes Council to review its current policy and to actually enforce it. It's not impossible. Happy to take questions.
Thank you. Thank you. Any questions, councillors? Yes, Councillor Bentley.
Thank you for your submission there this morning. How would you like council to word the compliance to encapsulate these things into a rating system in an easily understandable way?
As I indicated, I was able to spend 10 minutes surfing one website and found a number of properties selling at considerable levels over that 3-month period. I did that in 10 minutes. It took me longer to, in fact, print it off than it did to actually find the detail. It's not impossible. It may be a little difficult, and it may well require somebody to sit down and do a bit of work. But these days, with high technology, I think that they may well be able to get some shortcuts that I wasn't able to achieve just on my own this morning.
Thank you. Councillor Gould.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Alan, for your report this morning. I'll quote a few words first. On your piece of paper, your flyer given to us, we urge Rotorua Lakes Council to review its current policy and actually enforce it.
Yes.
On your written submission, you state in the first paragraph that 90 nights applied to Queenstown. How many nights do you want Rotorua Lakes Council to enforce it at a commercial level, or do you want a zero tolerance?
Well, I don't have a problem with the current policy of 100 nights. It's not that far different from 90. Where Queenstown differs, to my understanding, is that they actually have a step level below that 90, where there are levies applied, for lack of a better word, for those that sell less than 90. But as the speaker earlier indicated, she had friends in Queenstown achieving $60,000 per annum out of their property. Now, I don't know whether they're paying commercial rates. I don't know whether the lady that was here earlier is paying commercial rates either. I don't know how many of these properties are paying commercial rates, or even any small loading that may be applied to them for running their businesses. But I think that, to answer your question, I don't have a problem with 100 nights being the tipping point where they go from residential to a commercial entity. But you may well care to consider the lesser level as well, as being some contribution needing to be made by these property owners that are running businesses. I think that there is a slight difference between Airbnb and those that are on the likes of Book a Batch holiday houses. Most of the Airbnb properties are owner-occupied, and they're selling off spare rooms. Often one room, sometimes more, and as was indicated here earlier, she has sometimes up to 5 guests, so I would imagine there's 2 or 3 rooms being sold there. That's a little bit different because the owner is still there. In these other properties, and on Book a Batch, they have 455 listings when I checked that 2 to 3 weeks ago. Now, they are full houses that the people can purchase and rent for a period that they wish, as long as it's available, and it's theirs to occupy. It's like walking into a motel room. You haven't got the owner stepping around watching what you're doing. It is effectively a rental business. And I would just expect that these properties that operate like that are treated as businesses. That's 455 homes around Rotorua operating as businesses.
I suspect that you can add a couple more hundred to that, actually, from what we've seen with some of the figures.
Yeah.
But Councillor Sturt.
I don't want to dispute the summary and we'll debate the pros and cons of that. But you said with regard to the Book a Batch that they are standalone. The old B&B, the owners stayed there, but in my experience and what I've seen, the Book a Batch and the Airbnb, they actually rent out the whole house, and the house is not occupied by the owner.
That may well be the case for some of the Airbnb properties. I haven't done an analysis at all of how many properties actually have the owner in residence. There may well be some, such as the previous speaker, who she is resident in her property. There may well be others where they are not. I don't know what the ratio would be. But certainly with Book a Batch, holiday houses, you can rent the whole house to yourself.
Just one final question, Madam Chair. Can you explain to the council why you believe it's fair that they should pay more than the standard residential rating, regardless of what the threshold is? Why should they pay more?
Because they are running as a business. And the council sees fit to charge a loading to businesses for the rates that they pay on that property. Currently 1.72 as I understand. And the typical rate on a motel on Fenton Street is approaching $20,000. Typical rate on a private residence, somewhere around 4 to 6. I'm not saying that the private residence needs to pay $20,000, but what I'm saying is that there needs to be something in there that puts some more responsibility on the property owners of those running as a business, akin to a traditional commercial hotel or motel.
And our final question, Your Worship.
Ellen, we're just trying to grapple with the size of this and whether we should get into this at all, really, for us. And are we killing the goose that lays the golden egg? And I suppose from your hospitality advocacy, what is your average occupancy, and is that the issue that you're really worried about, that the market's bringing in competition and that we're not regulating that competition? Because with regulation comes compliance costs for council, and we're being told to compress our expenditure. So you can see the balance that we're going to have to make here about what are we trying to fix.
Of course. We have no problem with where the market has gone and is heading. I personally have used short-term accommodations such as these in my travels around the country with my family. It suits us, it suits a number of other people. That's where the market is heading. And business is business. So current businesses in the traditional sense need to basically deal with it, as it were. To answer your question, occupancy levels, a typical motel would be happy for around 70-75% occupancy across the year. They'd be happy with that. Some of the really good ones, now we have Sport of Kings here in town. They won a national award with our organisation just last year. They are a very, very successful and popular business. My understanding is they have an excess of about 90%. That's exceptional. That's very exceptional. But I've read some of the submissions that were placed, and I've found them online, and people talk about the sold out signs down Fenton Street. That's very, very rare. I would challenge anybody to go down Fenton Street on the weekend of the rugby match coming up and not find a room. There are plenty of rooms out there. There were plenty of rooms out there for crankworks. Lots of rooms were available for crankworks. There was no sellout. But that's just business. We don't have any problem with people utilising a private residence to run a business. Just treat it as a business, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming along this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're running a little ahead of time. So Rotorua Lakes Community Board, Phil, you all right to? Thank you. Kia ora koutou. Welcome. A smart delegation we have this morning.
Yes, so...
Good morning.
Look, it's a takeover. Look, thank you for giving us this opportunity to submit to you, and I'd like to introduce my board to you. We have my Deputy Chair, Jim Stanton, we have Fred Stevens, and we have Nick Chater. And they're a fantastic team, and the Lakes Board is very lucky to have them. Okay, now what I'd like to do today is just change things a little bit. We're going to start at the back of the booklet and come to the front, and I'm sure you'll understand why I want to do it that way. So what I'm going to do is ask Jim to start off and talk about the financial matters in the annual plan.
Good morning all, here. Yep. So straight into it. I'll talk about Conversation 5, the removal of the Community Board targeted rate, and obviously we reiterate our full support for this proposal. It aligns with our submissions since the introduction of the Community Board, Lakes Community Board. We believe it not only provides consistency, but more importantly is necessary in recognition of the significant and increasing role that community boards and other similar entities play in promoting engagement and feedback within their areas of interest, with commensurate benefit to council and the district. And I'd like to add that this is a view that is widely held across the country amongst community boards and was strongly expounded at our recent National Community Board Conference. I might say that if you did not have community boards, then that work that community boards is involved in would devolve back to the council, where the costs would be commensurate. In terms of the capital spend in para 14 of our submission, can we just say that we support the devolvement of the capital funding to community boards and as intended, but reconciling data relating to the expenditure year on year always comes up as a bit of a challenge to many of us, and we noted the variances in this report late in the piece between the LTP and this document. So the comment on page 24 that council only needs to borrow 3.5 million more than proposed in the LTP adds to the puzzlement. We simply need to, or seek to be better informed around the apparent anomalies, and so that we can expound these explanations back to our communities. In terms of rating differentials and rates in paras 13 and 15 of the submission, it is well known amongst you that we believe differentials to be a valid mechanism to provide equity and fairness in our rural residential sector, particularly in our lakes communities. Our long-held view is that present and intended levels in no way compensates our residents for reduced benefits and services currently received, and that coupled with significant taxation penalties due to the comparatively high property values. We'll just say that we look forward to participating in a comprehensive and fully transparent review of these matters upcoming. The board has lent its support for the proposed increase in distribution of rates for the coming financial year. Although they exceed expectations, we have acknowledged the explanations in advance for the necessity. That's me, I think, Phil. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. If you just switch your microphone off. Okay, look, I'm just going to talk very quickly about the other points we've covered in our submission. The first one is the short-term accommodation, which is, a lot of people have been talking to today. Look, we think this is a really good discussion to start having, but from our perspective, there's no need to rush it. We feel that the issue is quite different in the lakes area in our community than what's going on in town, and there may be different solutions between the two different communities. And what we would like to do is have the time to have a discussion in the lakes area, and we're very keen to promote a discussion on this in the lakes area, but we don't feel that we need to rush into a decision now. We have got the long-term plan review coming up, and we think that's a more appropriate time to address it. And I'd just say from a personal, I mean, I think there are lots of solutions, and I'd just say from a personal point of view, I was fortunate enough to be booking an Airbnb in another country recently, and in actual fact, when I booked it, there was a taxation bit. Airbnb took the taxation bit out. So you didn't have to know, you guys wouldn't have to know who the person was who was renting the place. It was all done through the app. And so I think there are a lot of solutions here we could pursue. In terms of the museum targeted rate, what more can we say? Yes. I think it's some people seem to have misunderstood that this is a rate to rebuild the museum, and I only wish that we could do it for $14 a household. Yeah. But what I would say is, in the meantime, this is an iconic building for us. It's a huge resource with our museum, and we need to protect our museum, we need to protect our artefacts, and we need to protect our staff and the institutional knowledge that they have. With the Performing Arts Centre, we do support this. In our submission, we've said that we totally support the earthquake upgrade. What we did note was that the funding for the whole project was spread over 2 years, and just because of uncertainties around things like the cost of the museum, around other projects out in the community that we were wanting to achieve, we wondered if we should be looking at that upgrade part of that in the coming year, not this year. And I presumed because it was spread over the 2 years, we'd be doing the earthquake strengthening first. So that's where we're coming from on that. In our submission, we did mention the Aquatic Centre, and that came out from a presentation we had at this table about the project to teach every child in Rotorua to swim, and we just so support that. And why do we support it? Because when people drown in Rotorua, they drown in our lakes. And for those who live around the lakes, those lakes are part of our family. They're a person to us. And every death in those lakes really hurts us. So there's just a huge amount of support for that, teaching everyone to swim, getting them safe in the water. The waste management services, look, we recognise this is an issue mainly for the Rural Community Board, and we know they're working well with Stavros and his staff to come to solutions on this, so we will support what the Rural Board and Stavros's team come up with. The only thing we'd like to add to that is that we don't support a targeted rate on vacant land. In our community, that will really hit iwi hard. They have a lot of vacant land that is unlikely ever to be occupied. So that's, we missed that out of our submission, so I'm just adding that in there. So that brings us to a very minor topic of the East Rotoiti-Rotomau sewage scheme. And you've heard a lot of submissions on this issue, and I actually made some notes. I'm going to read this because it's very important to me, and I want to make sure I get everything across to you. So you've heard a lot of submissions, and you've heard them from a broad range of that community. And what you've heard is overwhelming support. Many have raised concerns around the cost, but they've still supported the scheme. And you've heard iwi come here and say they're not waiting for a handout from you, they're seeking funding other places. And one of the presentations said that they're not only seeking that funds for themselves, they're seeking funds that they can help Pākehā in the community. And this is how widespread the support is and how that whole community has come together. We've seen objections raised against the resource consent, and we went out to those communities again, and the Rotomau community said, we understand, and they support having a step system there instead of grinder pumps, in spite the increased cost. You've heard from people at Rotorua basically wanting to join the scheme, and I think it's really important to address their desires and their need to be part of the scheme, and I hope in the upcoming long-term plan we'll be able to work towards finding a solution and funding sources to enable them to become part of our scheme. You've also had a few people from outside the scheme area wonder if the scheme will lead to more schemes at Tarawera, at Mamaku, at Rotorua, and I'm going to say no. And the reason why I say no is it's not the scheme that's going to lead to those other schemes happening. Those other communities will get schemes because they need them to protect the lakes, to protect people's health, because for Rotorua to grow, we need to protect and look after our people and our environment. In fact, they'll get them for exactly the same reason that I hope you will continue with the Rotoiti-Rotomau scheme, to protect the lakes, to protect the people, and to protect the future. Thanks. Very happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Yes, we could take a question or two. Your Worship?
Thank you for a terrific submission, really. That's helpful for us about the lake's perspective and the value to the whole district. We had a bit of a clangor this morning about biolytics that's got us a bit confused when we've heard such overwhelming support for the working party's proposed way forward. Is that something that we should be concerned about at this stage?
Excuse me. I don't think so. I think what you heard this morning, and I read the written submission, was actually proposed to the community about 2.5 years ago, and it was rejected by the community. But the community did take concerns out of that, and that is how we came up with the model we've got now of biolytics attached to a reticulation scheme, and now the STEP scheme for Rotorua. And furthermore, I think if we went back to Mr. Witchman's presentation yesterday, I think he outlined that any system that relies on soakage fields around the property will exclude Māori from their aspirations because they simply won't have the land to accommodate any future growth. So for them, while they support the biolytics, having the reticulation is absolutely vital for them.
Councillor Maxwell?
Actually, my question was similar, but so just to reinforce then, the step system chosen was the preferred over the grinder one, but not ruling out biolytics, and is the delay for a year to 2018 to allow the trials and that to help with the decision? Would I be right on that? Yeah.
Yes, so the STEP system was proposed for Rotorua to address cultural concerns that were raised by objectors to the resource consent. And I think that just shows, it's something that shows how strong a support there is out there, that a whole community, when we understand, will go with STEP. The biolytics was always intended to have a trial for a year to make sure that it would work in a reticulation system, because that's a brand new way of trialling it. STEP system is in use on a reticulated system in many parts of New Zealand, and we've actually been out to look at them in action.
And the final question, Councillor Stewart.
Mine's more on waste management. My other questions have been asked regarding your preference for the STEP, but prior to the introduction of the curbside recycling, Council engaged in extensive consultation with the Lakes community into designing issues particular to particular areas. Have those all been adequately covered? There's no mention in your submission. Have those been adequately covered? And are the residents in the Lakes Community Board area happy with the service delivery that's occurring at the moment?
Okay, so it's fair to say that we did have a few teething problems in introducing the new system to the Lakes area. What has happened is that we have designed individual solutions for individual areas. There was a certain amount of consternation in the communities, those communities, about those different models, but I think they have all settled down now. Our transfer stations are getting really good use. We do note that people outside of the area love our transfer stations so much they come and use them themselves, which might not be ideal, but we would rather see that rubbish at the transfer station than dumped down the side of a road somewhere. So I think it has settled down for us, and also I think most probably the experiences we all had have informed Stavros and his team about ways of going forward in the rural area. So hopefully it's been helpful to them.
Thank you. Look, thank you very much for coming along this morning and speaking to your very thorough presentation. Thank you. Submission. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having us.
Our next submitter is the Nongataha AFC. Mr. Skinner, Paul. Good morning, Paul. Morning, yes. You have 10 minutes, Paul, and if you'd like to leave a few minutes towards the end for questions, that'll be fine. It's up to you.
Yes, thank you very much. Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to address you this morning. My name is Paul Skinner. I'm the Secretary for Nongataha Football Club. We've made a submission specifically in respect of the part of the plan budget that's relating to maintenance and improvement of reserves. Our submission, our written submission, I won't read it, but just summarise what's included in there. We've explained that we feel that we're have a clear plan of what our club wants to achieve in the community, what we want to achieve as a club, where we want to develop in the future. We've been operating under that plan for 4 years now, and we've had some success in growing our membership. In terms of number of players, we've expanded the demographic in that we've now included a women's team. We're working with YBOP to improve to include female football from a young age right the way through. We've worked with in collaboration with Rotorua United to run a youth team or a number of youth teams for the past few years. So we feel that what we're doing is in alignment with really the council's priorities and council's objectives, and we were pleased when we saw the Parks and Recreation strategy that really fitted in with what we were already doing. So we were quite encouraged to see that, and submission really is that we feel that we can fit in with those objectives and help you to implement what you're trying to achieve through the strategy. However, we've also produced a development plan which has really identified some barriers to us continuing to grow and develop. In particular, the facilities at Tamarahi Reserve. We have a very small, limited training area that's used by now 4 senior teams, and already over halfway through the season, and the grass has virtually disappeared. It's not really suitable for our purposes, so we've identified that we need to look really at how we can improve those facilities. There's very limited scope within the boundaries of that reserve, so we spoke to the Parks Services about what our options might be, and it was suggested that really perhaps we could look at improvements at Jessie Martin Park to fulfil our needs. So really our submission is that we feel that would satisfy our requirements. It would be development there. I understand there's a draft development plan that was already drawn up to indicate how that could be developed, and so that would meet our needs. We would be able to continue developing our juniors, continue developing our successful senior teams, and look to expand even further in terms of what the club does within the community. So really, our submission is that we would be very keen to work with the council to develop the reserve at Jessie Martin Park, so that it can provide us with improved facilities. We also have, if that's putting that aside, we've also got issues at Tamarahi Reserve, into the surface water issues, the car parkings. It could be improved. It's not the most efficient efficient area, and quite often have problems with cars getting bogged down in the mud. So there are improvements there that also, if there's money spent on improvements and reserves, we feel that there's certainly opportunity there that would help us to operate successfully as a club. So we've also included in our submission reference to improvements that reserve as well. Just to summarise, we feel that what we're doing really is in alignment with what the council wants to achieve. We feel we can play a useful part in the community of that part of the district. And I was listening to the radio this morning, and there was a discussion saying how important sports clubs are to the vitality of communities, and that's certainly how we feel. So that's the basis of our submission. Thank you very much for listening this morning.
Yes, thank you very much. And I think we'd all agree about how useful and helpful sports clubs are to the well-being of the not only of the people who take part in the sports, but to the whole community. Councillor Stewart, you have a question?
This is an example of how effective the portfolios are. This club got hold of me about 18 months ago, and I met them on site. They told me their needs and wants and aspirations. They partook in the strategy group, and they're now asking us for a development management plan for their facilities to meet our objective, which is outstanding places to play. And I want to applaud you, Paul, and take back to the committee. I'm delighted with what you put forward, because this will lead Raj and I forward to our staff to bring forward that development plan for you. Because quite frankly, Paul, some of your facilities out there are disgraceful. When you're at the top of your league, you are now performing, and to have home teams there and see the facilities out there and cars up to their sideboards in mud, etc., etc. So I thank you for that. I think there's a comprehensive way forward here, Madam Chair. So I didn't really ask a question because you've answered all mine. I just want to congratulate you on your submission.
Thank you. Councillor Tapsell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And yes, thank you very much for your submission. This is a very, very well-written, well-informed submission. So thank you. And it's just the success of your club has been outstanding, and it is noticed, in particular with the men getting in the Northern League and doing quite well there. So the growth's definitely there. I did have a question looking at your plans about the embankment. Now, is the embankment actually part of Ngāti Whakaue tribal lands? Because they've got their farm just there. I'm just wondering if there's an opportunity to work alongside them as well to help with some of that, yeah.
Yes, well, my understanding is the boundary of the reserve runs part way up the embankment. So there is part of the embankment is within the reserve, and part is beyond. I'm not sure the ownership, whether it's Ngāti Whakaue or whether it's part of the state highway land. But it's certainly out. My understanding is outside of the boundary. So, but we feel there's sufficient land within the boundary that we could make better use of it, but there would need to be some significant works to make it either available as another training area or as a spectator area. Yes, part of it's within the reserve.
Councillor Hunt?
Thank you. Thanks, Paul. That actually flows on to my question, really. At the moment, you're using Jesse Martin as your overflow. If Jesse Martin is developed, then will you be looking to use Tamarahi as your overflow? And if so, what additional works would need to happen in order for you to continue to use your essentially X field as and when required, obviously, when the grass is suitable and things like that?
We haven't really discussed how a changeover of our facilities might work. In a sense, I thought I was putting the cart before the horse, so we're not really...
So the question is really, do you expect you will need an overflow area if you do move to Jesse Martin Park?
I think it would be useful, but as I say, at the moment, our junior and youth teams don't really feel as though they're part of the club. I think that's part of an issue. If we still had the facilities at Tamarai Reserve, then I feel we could use those more effectively in terms of making people have a sense of belonging to the facilities there. There'll be another issue in terms of the changing facilities, the club room. If we move lock, stock and barrel, or end up moving lock, stock and barrel to Jesse Martin Park, we'd have to recreate those facilities over there, and there's how we would fund that would be a big question mark for us. So I suppose my own feelings are, well, we might really want to see if we can maintain our position at Tamarai Reserve as well, at least until a time where we can fund improved changing clubroom facilities at Jesse Martin as well, and to replace them.
Thank you, Paul. We've come to a time. Thank you very much for coming along this morning. Thank you. Next submitter, the Rotorua Touch Association and BOP Touch Association. Iranui Takani. Good morning and welcome. Thank you. Yes, just the grey button, you're fine.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Yes, my name is Iranui Takani, aka Ira. I don't have a written submission in front of you, but apart from what I requested online, but what we are handing out are some economic reports which will support my submission here this morning. I feel that our request is relatively simple, and we have spoken to this a few years back as well, and that is the upgrade and extension of toilet facilities at Puaringa Park and power on site. Now, the reason that we would like those upgraded is because our Bay of Plenty Touch Association, and Rotorua Touch Association bring to Rotorua 2 major tournaments each year, and we've been bringing the junior tournament to Rotorua for the past 6 years. We've, in the last 2 years, built that tournament to be the largest touch tournament in New Zealand. And if anyone's ever driven past Puaringa Park at anniversary weekend, you would struggle to get through the traffic. We don't have an economic impact report for that particular tournament, but what I have submitted is a report from the second biggest tournament in New Zealand, and this was held in Christchurch last year. And that's quite comprehensive. So without being an expert in that particular area, I know how it impacts here in Rotorua and the impact it has had on our children. So this tournament is for ages, 6. We've had 6-year-olds play, from 6 up to 13. And this is the highest tournament. This is their major tournament. This is like their national event for this particular age group, representing their provinces. Now, Bay of Plenty have had the highest number of teams enter this tournament each year for the last 4 years that I've been involved in it. And that's because it's held here in Rotorua. So we're giving all of our children, our local children, and throughout the Bay of Plenty, the opportunity to play at this level. What's happened from there is that we have now a lot more representatives at national level, and that's not only with players, that's with coaches and managers as well. But we have requested this before for an extension, an upgrade of the facilities that are already there would not only benefit touch but also soccer. The park is also used for cricket as well. We have support from the other northern regions who are involved, which are, there are 6 other regions from the top of the North Island down to the Bay of Plenty, and they are in support of this tournament being held in Rotorua. They like how easy it is to get around the city, the close vicinity of all the services available, accommodation, food and everything else. And the other paper that I have here is from the New Zealand Māori Touch Nats, which is held at the beginning of December each year. And other provinces are very keen for them to continue to be held in Rotorua as well. And that's because of the, Rotorua being the hub of Māori events. I say I think it's relatively simple. It only needs money. Any questions?
Thank you. I'm sure there will be some questions. Yes, Your Worship.
Kia ora. Thank you for coming, Ida, and I know that Trevor and I get there to open and are overwhelmed at the numbers, actually, that it seem to be growing year on year. You're not asking for much. You're asking for 1 power box and some toilets.
Correct, power on site. There are toilets there already.
Yeah.
But when we host this event, we last year had to bring in 2 toilet trucks.
Portaloo, yeah.
Yeah, well, we had portaloos as well, but with this particular age group, portaloos aren't ideal. Not that easy for kids to use and very easy for them to clog up, which means that, we've got to get the trucks in to service them regularly. And when you're trying to bring trucks through the number of kids playing on the park, it's just not easy. So the toilet trucks are fantastic things, but they're at a cost of $7,000 a truck. Now, we've been well supported by RECT over the last couple of years, which has been fantastic. But really, it needs an upgrade of the toilet facilities there and power on site, which we don't see as that difficult. Says me, I'm not an electrician, but, a power box on the side of a pole, all we've got to do, currently we run all our extension leads from the Waka Club, which is fine when the weather's fine, but we have had it rain one weekend, so, not ideal. And really, the people do love coming to Rotorua, they love that park. Council have tried to get us to look at the stadium, but it's too fragmented, and still, again, the toilet facilities don't work. Parking is a bit of an issue at Puringa Park, but not a major at this stage. That's something that could be done further down the track. And we need to take this opportunity to secure this tournament as our own. We've done that really for the last 6 years, and we could, if we just improve those facilities, we could nail it. It could be here for a very long time.
Thank you. Councillor Stewart.
Kia ora, Ira. Nice to see you again.
Thanks.
Ira, where would you like the toilets positioned? Because that's strategically really important.
There are toilet facilities there at the moment, and plenty of space for those to be extended, across that sort of car park area, which would work. Ideally, having something over at the Waka end would be great as well. We use the Waka Club rooms as a base for our referees. Yeah, but their facilities, their toilet facilities are limited. So ideally, a public facility over that side would be good as well. I look at what you've done out at Puketawhero Park, having that little toilet block there. So yeah, definitely, if we could really get something like that, that would be fantastic.
Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ira, very timely submission, and I'm not sure if you're aware, but there is a draft restoration plan for the entire sanatorium reserve, which Puringa Park sits within, and it identifies the shortcomings of the toilet block that's there. So it's really good that you've made this submission. I don't think so. You do like the idea of not having all the toilets in one area, that they are in separate areas. It'd be really good to get your input into this draft. That's what I'm saying.
I think that with the size of the park, Ideal, of course, because we can put all these fields on there, but for the little kiddies to get from one side to the other when they're all of a sudden decide they need to go, and, it's fairly, what little kids are like. So it would be ideal. Currently, the last tournament, we had 2 toilet trucks placed, one in the centre of the park and one over by that toilet block as well. But what we found was we had to keep shooing people out of the Waka Club rooms. They kept wanting to go in that side as well. So ideally, if there's enough money to stretch that far, yes, a toilet block on either side of the park, and because of that size.
Thank you. Now, final question, Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. Kia ora. I've thoroughly enjoyed attending these each time they're played down here. The question I have is, Hopu Hopu in Waikato had it for 10 years. Will this, what you're requesting that here, will this help us secure it for, hopefully to make it the home base for ever and ever? First question.
Yes, the Te Arawa, the Māori Touch Nats, the other associations are very keen for us to continue hosting it here. There are some issues that they have to work out between Rotorua Touch and the New Zealand, those that run that particular tournament, but we know at this stage there are no plans to move it from Rotorua, but of course they need to upgrade the facilities because, again, Rotorua Touch has had to apply to RECT and even Bay Trust for funding to afford the toilet trucks. And the junior tournament, we are really working hard to nail that one here. Bay of Plenty are at a disadvantage because of the size of our district here, whereas so to be able to host this tournament here means our kiddies don't have to travel. If that tournament went to Auckland, because that's possible, that's the next place. That's the only other place that has facilities big enough to host the number of teams. 91 teams we had at the last tournament, and it's still growing. We've set a ceiling at 100 when we've had to set a ceiling. But if it goes to Auckland, our numbers will drop by half. There's no way that our little kiddies and supporters will be able to afford to go up there.
And just to follow up on, and you did say parking is not a problem, but I think one year was a problem when there was another event on, there was BMX or something at the other place. Now this year's tournament, I don't know what dates you are going to have, but we do have Mudtopia, I think, at the beginning of December, the Mud Festival. Is it not clashing with that place?
I'm not sure about this particular tournament is the first weekend in December. I'm not sure about those dates. This isn't our biggest tournament yet because there's something about using Arawa Park or something, isn't there? I do remember those discussions, but I am not sure about that.
I don't think it clashes. I don't think there's a clash, actually. Phil, thank you very much for coming along this morning, speaking to your presentation. Thank you.
Sorry, can I just add one thing about the parking? It's not that it wasn't an issue, and there was a parking management plan drawn up. It's just that we've been offered the use of that FIC short golf course as extra parking. And then we've just got to have people, directing them under the underpass and over to the park. We didn't have that facility available last year. And yes, there is more parking that does need to be available, but we think we can get by. And we've been in discussions with some of your council people who've been really helpful. So.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next submitter, Samantha White. Samantha here. Oh, thank you. Good morning, Samantha. You have 10 minutes, so thank you.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Firstly, my apologies for thinking the 23rd was today, and thank you for the opportunity today. I'm concerned council, though, are looking to make the rates less proportional to property value by increasingly using the targeted rates, which give a blanket cost across the property values. This, I believe, is ignoring why people have less valued homes. Is it not because what you buy or rent is proportional to income? The preferred choice by council in more than one of the conversations is therefore very concerning. The one time council talks about removing a blanket targeted rate and moving into the general rate, we are asked our opinion without knowing how this affects rates for the different bands. Overall, I found the information increasingly ambiguous after conversation one. Information I felt was needed to make informed decisions was missing, such as costings of the different options, and I was therefore left feeling that this is just an exercise and our opinion doesn't really count. In tougher times, families are suffering, so I'm sure you will hear from farmers who are concerned about council's proposals to reduce the remission. However, to not do so means families and other businesses who have it tough are on their own and suffer the consequences. Whilst farmers continue to receive support, and we all know how some ratepayers don't like special treatments of any groups. But on a serious note, one of the biggest contributors to the local economy is tourism, and so to have a remission for one group and not another, when they are both contribute to the local economy, doesn't seem right. Again, ambiguity made me struggle with the short-term rental part. No costings, no indication whether or not resources spent on recovering any monies would be covered, and secondly, if the district would benefit from increased revenue. There is undoubtedly a cost on the infrastructure from these, and one that is potentially recoverable. However, we are given a throwaway comment about it. But how much does the council spend on, for example, traffic wardens fining people for overstaying a parking space or parking on a verge when they are spending money in the district? But where is that revenue spent? We know that rates from short-term rentals could be used to cover some of the infrastructure costs. So what are the parking fines used to cover for the betterment of the district? I'm not sure that we're applying logic to what we chase and what we don't. Tougher times are here. We have families homeless, unable to feed their families adequately and warm their homes adequately, and the increased thefts. So I'm shocked to see governance of council costing more than waste management, or the same as waste management and community safety. The annual plan perhaps should include how council are taking stock of their own efficiencies, such as catering costs, office change, pomp and circumstance, etc. I included the need for our district to have a bylaw for the banning of plastic bags. We have a beautiful district and plastic bags harm this. I would also like to see council set the benchmark of encouraging bilingual conversations. This is not making signs bilingual. This is about making it obvious that I te wā ka hiko I tātou ki roto I te kauni here, ka mohi o tātou ka taia tātou ki te koro o Māori me etahi tanata. Conversing in te reo Māori is kei te pai when you come into the council office. English is everywhere. It can take a back seat without it being harmed. So I don't want to see ratepayers' money increasing the amounts of English with the translation of every Māori street sign. What I didn't include in my written submission are the football fields or soccer fields, both at Puaranga and Neil Hunt. Football is a winter sport and increasingly popular, it would appear, given the number of 13, 14-year-olds playing this season. But a winter sport needs adequate grounds to cope with the weather. Oh, there's some grass is simply not enough when junior grades get cancelled far too often to preserve the fields. Let's include in the plan the ability for these fields to cope with the winter weather. Drainage needs to be seriously looked at. The Saturday games attract teams from outside of Rotorua. Football, soccer attracts a diverse range of the community. In my son's team, there are Pākehā, Māori, those from Asian backgrounds. So it is a real, boys and girls, so it's a real diverse sport in Rotorua. We are wanting a vibrant, growing community, one that engages and thrives, so quality grassroots facilities across a range of sports needs to be paramount, alongside an accessible community performing arts centre, which has the capability to attract larger shows as well, is a must. But unless we can grow what is here already, there is little point. Kia ora.
Thank you, Samantha. I'm sure there'll be a number of questions. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Samantha, and a lot of topics you've covered there. The one that is interesting for us, because this is the only submission, I think, calling for a bylaw on banning plastic bags. Are you involved at all in the sustainability portfolio or the business packaging accord?
No.
Okay. Okay. That's just something we'll note.
I included it because the recycling facilities are great, but we can't get rid of any plastic bags or plastic film, or even if they've got a recyclable number on them. So I just think that if you look abroad in other areas where they've banned plastic bags, it's had a huge impact. We're surrounded by beautiful lakes and greenery, and the impact on wildlife, as well as what it looks like, just meant I thought that it was a way to go, really.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Stewart.
It's to meet you rather than on Facebook. When you say about banning plastic bags, one thing I've noticed is people have, rather than using the paper bags that we used to have, are now using black polythene bags to put inside the recycling bins for their household rubbish. So is that part of the issue that you're talking about as well?
I wasn't aware of that. I was thinking more about the supermarket bags.
Councillor Tapsell.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Samantha. I believe you were a submission for the partnership as well, and just like then you've blown us away with your very well articulated and well informed submission, so thank you. Very interesting about your feedback about council driving the bilingual kaupapa. So I'm just wanting to clarify, were you wanting all staff or just the front of house staff that deal with the customers to be able to converse in both languages?
I think in a town or city like Rotorua, that if people, we have several kura kaupapa Māori, and so we have numbers of young people coming out of education that are bilingual. We have adults that are bilingual, but if the council could lead the way where staff who, and obviously I'm not speaking as somebody who is fluent, but I would hope that in an encouraging environment where staff are or feel welcome to kōrero Māori, that there's something that identifies them as being bilingual, and so people coming in to council feel confident that they can kōrero Māori to that person without being looked at strangely, because my tamariki have had swimming lessons in te reo Māori, and I have witnessed other staff turning around and staring at the person conducting the lesson in te reo Māori, which in this day and age I wouldn't expect. So I think if we are, and there's been a lot of talk in the media, so I just chose to include it in my submission, with the amount of kura kaupapa Māori and bilingual speakers in Rotorua already, it's just a way to go that's more meaningful than increasing the amount of English somewhere that has been mooted as well, which would be to make every street sign bilingual, and I just don't think that's the way to go, really. Kia ora.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Samantha, for coming along and presenting talking to your submission today. Thank you. Thank you. The next submitter, Rotorua Taupō Federated Farmers, Alan Wills. Good morning, Alan. Good morning, Neil. Good morning. Kia ora, welcome.
already, is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, right, 10 minutes, is it?
Yes, thank you. If you want to
Okay.
use the whole 10 minutes to talk to your submission, or if you'd like to leave a few minutes towards the end for questions.
We'll endeavour to do that.
Thank you.
So I'll just go directly over to, you've got a copy of our submission there, I'll go directly over to rate increases. And just want to make the point here that the rural area took a substantial hit last year, and that's a fact. And 3.8 is sitting there looking at us again at the moment. But one of the things that we've also submitted in this document is that we would let the remission slowly work itself out. But I want you to understand that the numbers for farmers, the rate numbers are big, they're substantial, 40,000 in our case. I think the council needs to take a serious look at the services, particularly the one that seems to get rural people upset about is the lack of ceiling in our rural area. We need to go back to set an objective of 7 Ks annually or thereabouts. That would be a good move by the council to do that. Having taken a hit on a big rate increase last year, and we're prepared to let the remission program slowly work itself out. But you need to be doing your bit as well, quite frankly. Waste management, some issues here. I think the partial charge on bare lands talks for itself. But I see one of the issues developing in the rural area with the proposed rubbish collection and everything else that you're talking about, is that a number of us out there have taken the bull by the horns and got our own programs going. On our farm, we have a waste management bin, 6 houses supply it, and 2 farms. Now, it's a very, very efficient way of dealing with the waste, the rubbish and the waste that we have on the farms. The truck comes in, takes it all away, there's no toing and froing from the transfer station. Yes, the recycling, we collect in 44-gallon drums and it goes down every 2 or 3 or 4 weeks. But what I don't want you to be doing is to hitting us with a rate for rubbish collection when we have actually taken the bull by the horns and got a very efficient system going on our farms. Now, we're not the only ones. My neighbour's got one, there's quite a few out there. You might be surprised how many there are. So I think that's an issue that you need to be aware of, because it's been going on for some time, this talk about rubbish and so forth, and so we've stepped up and done something about it ourselves. All right, we don't want to be paying for it twice. Okay, we'll keep moving on through there. Another comment around targeted rates for community boards. We feel that this is important, so that the money that the rural community is putting into the coffers comes back to the rural community. It's not as transparent as I believe it could or should be. Okay. I think those are the main features that I'd like to highlight. Neil, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, there'd be one thing I'd like to highlight. I believe that you have split up the rating coming in from farming and from rural residential, and I think roughly it's 11% for both, which equates to 22%. Just remember that for our property, actually we got it's one working unit. We have 2 properties that are classed as rural residential. Okay, so we pay UAGCs for those different classes, for those different properties. It just happens that there's different trusts and slightly one different name change. So you can't separate rural residential from farming and actually say it's a different, it doesn't apply to farming, or farming doesn't contribute to it, because they do, and a number of farms are set up, or farming enterprises are set up that way. The other point I'd like to make is I'm probably not expecting too much. I'll be a little bit cynical here. I've been submitting for a long time. I'm sure you're going to accept our submission on 50% reduction on the remission quite happily and go yay, but I've got this funny feeling, like other years, that the other points in our submission will be ignored like they have been, and they are relevant points, and they do affect the rural community. So I'll watch the space, but I'll just play the Mr. Cynical person.
Thank you. Yes, Your Worship.
Yes, thank you for submitting. And Neil, I'm sure that the effectiveness of the Rural Board is starting to be reflected at this table. So I feel that you won't be ignored and well advocated for at this table. But one of the issues, Alan, that you raised that I think is a bit of a concern, we're hearing varied responses on rural refuse collections per se. Some say we've sorted it out ourselves, like you, so, you know, should we take a breather, step right back and wait till the Rural Board can come to us with what is, you can't have a bespoke solution for every village in the rural sector, but is that a preferred approach rather than what we've outlined in the annual plan?
That's a very good question. And I'm aware that you're working hard to try and get something to work. And I was at a meeting at Rotorua recently where there was an issue identified over rubbish bags and wheelie bins and the capacity of a bag and a wheelie bin and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, I'll have to think about that one. Can I get back to you on that one a little bit? Because I'd like to work that through a little bit. There's certainly a need for something out there. There's no mistake about it. But whether or not you can recognise the fact that those, and there's quite a few of us who've got bins in now, whether you can recognise that and accept that that's what we've done, but still provide a service to everyone else, I'm not sure. That's the sort of thing that we're looking at, isn't it?
Lintown had to make the same decision. They had a private system, you know, that worked for them. But I think we'd love you to work through it with the Rural Board.
Yeah.
I think that our preferred option, and it's in our submission, is that there is an opt-out. We certainly don't want to take a rubbish collection away from other parts of the community, and we're probably talking rural residential more. You know, I pay too as rural residential and a farming community, so we're not asking for that to be taken away. We're just asking for those options for the farming community to be retained.
That's a good answer, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, gentlemen, for your submission. I'm just intrigued in a comment that you've put under 3.2 on page 182 in the submissions, referring the council to section 101 of the Local Government Act, setting out the principles for funding of local government activities, drawing our attention to there being no rationale under these principles for applying a targeted rate for refuse collection to beer land grazing titles. Knowing the way Federated Farmers works, is that actually a legal opinion you're quoting there, or just drawing our attention to it?
Sorry, no, my understanding is it is actually a legal opinion, and from our staff member who put that in there.
Councillor Gould.
Chair. Thank you, Alan and Neil, for your presentation today. I'm quoting from your number 8, your remissions on rates. You've got, we look forward to further discussion on the level and use of the UAGC charge. Are you wanting that up or down or left the same, or how would you like to proceed with that particular issue?
I probably think you know the answer to that from farmers, and we expect the UAGC to be at the highest possible rate, which is 30% of the general rate.
Councillor Donaldson, and then Councillor Sturt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ellen, just a bit of crystal ball gazing in terms of the remission. So the remission arose out of a double whammy when the payout went down and valuations were held sky high prior to the collapse of the payout. We've heard a lot about how residential values have moved in Rotorua, something like 29% increase in house prices year on year. Have you any sense of how values have moved for the farming sector?
My take is that they haven't come back a significant amount, and this morning's announcement might help the dairy industry again, but there hasn't been a lot of farms sold, and that's how that's dealt with.
And I'll just jump in there too, and remember that farming used to have a differential, just like rural residential has one at the moment of 0.93, I think. We used to have one, and you took that off, and that was a double whammy also with that rate increase, and we're sitting at a one-on-one with urban. I'll make it quite clear now, before you even think about it, is if you think you're going to move it with the increase in values in the urban area, which I would say next year we're looking at the rate increase or the valuations changing quite a bit, you're going to be up against it if you think you're going to move at differentials just because you want to rebalance it.
Thank you. We're not at that stage. Councillor Sturt, a final question.
Herein lies the problem of doing the remission in the first place, because if you do it for one sector of the community, it should be fair to do it for the other sector of the community. That's why I voted against it. But my question is, on the waste management services, you've acknowledged that there are mixed messages we're getting out there in the rural community. Like you said, you've organised your own thing, and Neil recognised that there are rural residential people who want a bin to put at the front gate. So, and Her Worship acknowledged that we need to work with the Rural Community Board. But I mean, if we allow some sectors of the community to opt out and then others not to opt out, the cost just goes up to everybody who's included. And as Her Worship said, we had services in an urban residential situation that were covered by 3 different private companies. They've all gone now because we've gone with the council one. So I just wondered, do you know from a sustainability, this is my question, Madam Chair, do you know from a sustainability point of view that what you put in your skip bin is recycled?
No, nothing's recyclable that goes into the skip bin. We have a separate recycling program on the farm. Yes. And so we have 3 or 4 44-gallon drums in the shed, and bottles and plastic and cardboard and paper go into each individual bin. And that goes down to the transfer station sort of when the bins get full, once a month or something like that.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Neil, for coming along, presenting and speaking to your submission this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next submitter is Robert O'Kell. Is Robert here? Oh, thank you. Good morning, Robert. Thank you. Yes, just the grey button there. Just the grey button on the machine there, and we'll be able to hear you nice and clearly. Thank you.
Right. So my feedback is written first, but I've amplified that slightly. So my initial feedback was on conversation 1. It is not clear if an OSET is cheaper than a treatment system. Targeted rating is good, but it appears some properties will get the services and not pay. In addition, the ongoing operating cost is a 3/14 on the users and 11/14 on the ratepayers, representing a considerable subsidy to their properties. Then I'll amplify that and say, firstly, within this conversation, there's a statement that says the community wishes to avoid compliance with the regional rule, which I think is an interesting start. So if council wishes to assist the community in avoiding compliance with regional council rules, the question has to be asked is the community entitled to remove all legislative bodies it does not agree with? And then if we go to the calculations within this stuff, it appears that council is going to contribute $1,500 per property, and that amounts to $1.2 million for 770 properties. The council is going to borrow another $8.6 million, which effectively means that they're going to offer a 100% loan at 2.7% interest over 25 years to the Rotorua property owners, paid for by the ratepayers. Council is not a bank, and it's not a financial lending institution. So I have severe difficulty with that portion of it. Now, we also have the statement that the quotations for the expenditure on this is $52,000 per property for the solution. So I phoned up Hines and asked them what a ballpark figure was for instituting an ultimate OSET, and they quoted me approximately $20,000 for one that will meet the BOP rules. So I can't see how paying $52,000 is an arguable amount. So that deals with conversation one. So my proposal is no scheme, make people comply with the regional rule. But otherwise, we can all say, no, we don't want to comply with any of the rules you want to put in. Conversation two deals with our little refuse disposal system. So your proposal is that I pay you lots of money and you're not going to give me anything. So if you're going to give me 50 plastic bags that can be taken to a landfill, I don't see that as a service. Countdown will give me bags for nothing. I still have to bag and cart all my waste and take it to the CP, which for me is the landfill. So nothing changes there. That's no service. Pretending to offer a service is a sham and is reprehensible. So I propose no change to the existing, as the only thing that is transparent is the plastic bag. Conversation 3, the earthquake strengthening of the conference centre. I can't see any cost-benefit analysis or explanation versus income, of the expenditure versus income. The building is not that old. Why was it not strengthened during the last upgrade? And why was it not refurbished with its proposed use in mind? This is reminiscent of the continual changes to the central city, which are change but don't appear to provide any improvement. Conversation 4. If the budget has $400,000 less income, spend less. I propose no targeted rate. As part of the farming community, we are price takers. So what is available to us is what we get. We can't just sit there and say, oh, well, we're going to get $4.50 and then we're going to change it. I'll get to the remissions thing in a minute. So I propose no targeted rate. Conversation 5, removal of the community board targeted rate. Now I've started off by saying that I have trying to make a consistent policy. So if there's a targeted rate, leave it. It's a targeted rate. Rating differentials. So there is no evidence provided of why rating differentials should not remain based on services provided and benefits that accrue. And then we come to the farming remission. My opinion of remissions is that they are a symptom of a rating system that is unfair and is bodged to try and placate interest groups, which is essentially what Councillor Sturt has just said. And so every time you fiddle around with things, trying to placate one group against another, you're just making a mess and reducing what little credibility you've got. Rates increases. So the statement is false as far as I can tell, because you sit there and say, oh yes, well, we're going to reduce debt. Well, as far as I'm concerned,
This council has a 3-year tenure. What we need to look at is what happens within that 3-year tenure, and what's proposed to happen within that 3-year tenure is that you're going to increase debt by $15 million. So I don't see anything there that says that you're going to be anywhere close to balancing any budgets or doing anything to reduce debt within your official period of time that you're entitled to be in office. And this saying, oh, well, in 20 years' time, we're going to reduce it. Well, I'm not interested in what happens in 20 years' time. As far as I'm concerned, a council office is 3 years. That's the budget. If they're going to increase by 15 million, you can't say you're reducing debt at all. So, short-term rental accommodation, as far as I can see, the other council has more or less given up on it, and I can only see it increasing staff levels and provide no income, so I oppose it. General comments. The publication in the Weekender was out. It said that it was 70-30, and it should have been 80-20. So the information is false. The back of the district plan, we look at the proportions. So maybe it's the next page down. It's refusing to open for me. We have a nice little graph, wonderful little graph, which is supposed to have a black bar showing the airport debt. There's no black bar. So have you managed to eliminate the airport debt without telling anybody? Or is it just, yet again, your documentation is not up to the mark? And that is pretty much my submission.
Thank you very much. Any questions, councillors? Thank you for coming along this morning and speaking to your submission. Thank you. Councillors, our final submitter this morning is Joe Liddell. Joe's just arrived, is that right? Thank you. Good morning, Joe. Yes, just make yourself comfortable, Joe. And you do have 10 minutes if you want to take the whole 10 minutes to talk to your submission or go through the points, relevant points for us. I think that's fine. Or if you'd like to leave a few minutes at the end for questions, I'll leave that up to you. But you do have 10 minutes.
How does that go? Great. Yeah, thank you firstly for the opportunity to speak here. I'm very passionate about waste management and how we pay for that. A quick basic background from me, I've got 5 children and we try to live a waste-free lifestyle, and I'm here because I don't really like to fund other people's wasteful lifestyle. And I think it's firstly that it's great that we've moved so much recycling and glass out of those brown bags, but yeah, I'd like to see us further move into the preferred options of reduce and reuse and compost. And also frustrated that there's still a lot more rubbish out there, frustrated that big companies like Pack and Save are still, with the polystyrene meat trays and toothbrushes that'll stay on the planet forever. You know, I don't understand why they wouldn't have bamboo toothbrushes up there with their stock and other options. And that the introduction of new wastes, such as the baby food pouches that are now the supermarket puts us on a shelf and then it's just common use. So every time a baby eats now, that's something to contribute to the planet forever. But my main shift I want to talk about today is shifting the paying for recycling and waste back to its creators. I understand that you guys are doing some bin surveys. I'd really like to know some bin survey results by brand owner, by what percentage of beverages, by what percentage did water make up those containers, and also what products offered benefits to the community versus those that didn't. And sort of talking about by what I want to do by brand owner, I've got Coca-Cola, they've got Coke, Coke Zero, Diet Coke, Powerade, Pump, Fanta, Sprite, Kerry Juices, Schweppes, E2, Lift, Fuse Tea, and so much more. What percentage of that waste do they make up? They make a revenue of $9 billion. I choose to drink tap water. I fund that. That's just not right. And then you've got Mitsubishi from Japan, they own Lion Nathan here. That's Spates, Steinlager, Max, Waikato Draft, Canterbury Draft, Emerson's, Corona, Stella, Guinness, Lion Red, Lion Black, Lion Ice, Light Iron, Lindau, Daniel de Bruyne, Hunterways, Wither Hills, more wineries, Isaac Cider, Smirnoff, 42 Below, bottled waters, milk products, the list just goes on. What percentage do they make up? You know, they've got, I think it was assets of $26 trillion, and I'm cleaning up their mess. I don't want to. Heineken, again, a massive list. Pepsi, perhaps even a bigger list. Gatorade, V, Rockstar, Lucasade, Just Juice, Simply Squeezed, they've probably got 30 products. So just between these 4 companies, what percentage of our recycling and glass do they make up? I'd say it'd probably be close to 90. I don't know, maybe even higher. And the sad thing about these products also is how do they benefit our community? We're encouraging them, we're paying for them, we're subsidising them. You know, what do they do for child poverty, child obesity, family violence, dental health? I don't think you could find any positives there. So why do we subsidise them? Why do we encourage them? Why do we support international corporations? And it's silly too because none of these products are even necessary. The council we're very lucky to all have taps in our houses and presumably glasses, and if you don't, you can get them for about 50 cents. Then we've all got tap water, so none of these products are even necessary. But then it also goes on a bit beyond beverages. There's many supermarket products like shampoo and conditioner. Shampoo is actually 80% water. Conditioner's 95% water. Assumably these people use it in the shower, and everybody's shower does have water. I use this product here. It is $18, but it's the equivalent of 5 bottles of conditioner. This is what you're paying for. You transport that water home, then you have to put that container in the rubbish, then it has to go be recycled. Just not necessary. And in the past, we were much better at reusing. We did milk, soft drink, beer, and wine. But now they've managed to outsource all those costs to local bodies. It's definitely, good to get to that recycling stage, but we're not as good as we were so many years ago. There are examples in the world of people that are reusing, like Mexico. And why are they doing it? Probably because their local bodies don't have enough money. So unfortunately, we're too wealthy in creating these problems. And people say it wouldn't work here because no one would return their bottle for 5 cents. Well, find a price point where they will return it. If it was $2, if it was $3, and then how many people would choose perhaps not to have that bottle or perhaps not have that soft drink because it was a bit inconvenient. Well, maybe make it compulsory premixes by a certain date. You have to return your bottle to refill it. This has all been done in the past. And wine bottles, they used to all be reused, but they're not used by wineries now because it was they find the size variation causes too much trouble for their machines. So, why not set a standard size? If you don't use the standard size, you'll have to pay an extra price. And from the council too, it's great to see the night market and lots of reusable containers and compostable. But then on the other side, we went to a recent craft at the government gardens, but it was polystyrene cups and straws. It was like, no, not for our children. And great to see the drinks and stuff at the skates park. And yes, I'd like to see some goals perhaps around reducing maybe even our collection of recycling. Maybe that could go down to monthly, and then even the rubbish fortnightly with goals in place of moving to reduce and reuse and perhaps shifting that cost to reduce consumption. And maybe that 9% of our rates can go back on those creators in Japan and the States. And then if that happens, there'll be multiple benefits of health and all sorts of areas. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jo. There might be a question or two from the councillors. No, I think you've put it very succinctly. Thank you. Thank you very much, Jo, and thank you for your concern for our environment and just highlighting some of those issues. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Your Worship, councillors. Thank you. We've come to the conclusion of the submissions on our 2017-2018 annual plan. I'd like to now call for a mover and a seconder, please, that we close this meeting. Thank you, Councillor Bentley. Thank you, Councillor Gould. All those in favour, please say aye. Thank you. Carried. Councillors, we're running a little ahead of time. I just wondered if we'd like to have a bit of, just about 5 or 10 minutes on our own, just to talk about a few things. That be all right before we head away? I think there might be lunch. Yes, there is lunch. Yes, so we'll have a talk about where to next. Thank you. But I think we might do that with the public excluded.